lifecycle, sorry, the ML Ops lifecycle is just fundamentally more complicated than the software development lifecycle. So when you're doing software development and life is easy, kind of. It's easier anyway, because all you need to do is you need to think about versioning specific versions of your code. Because as long as you're Dockerizing things, then you ought to only need to know exactly which version of the code was used, plus the Docker file and the dependencies, in order to reproducibly build the same, or effectively the same, deployable artifact. And so you can create code, you can test that code in CI, you can deploy that code into production, and then your monitoring system can tell you how well it's performing. Maybe you need to upgrade a database, maybe you need to go and optimize a certain code path, and you can go around this loop as quickly as you can. And that's basically what we're doing with DevOps. But with machine learning and ML Ops, you've got this fundamentally more complicated thing going on, which is that you've got data coming into the system, which is a major form of entropy, and you've got code that's being written to train the models, and you've got parameters which are being fed in to training the models. The model runs, the model training runs, sorry, and all of these things combine. And before you even train a model, you've also got the data runs, which is when you're doing feature engineering, or you're filtering or splitting the data. And so you're executing a certain version of a piece of code against a certain input data set and creating an intermediate data set. That's what a data run is. Or you're running a certain version of a piece of code against an input data set, like a test, training, and validation set. And then you're creating a model as an output. And so when you're doing ML, when you're developing machine learning models, you are doing these data runs and these model runs, whether you're keeping track of them or not. These might be the cells that you run in your Jupyter notebook, or the Python scripts that you run on your laptop. And these runs are happening. You just haven't given a name to them. And so what we've realized is that it's really important to introduce this notion of run as a kind of a building block. It's a fundamental object in the system when you're doing ML Ops. It's this version of this piece of code ran in this environment with this input data and these parameters, and it created this output. And one of those types of outputs, like I said, is models. And then the model itself, the serialized model file, is the deployable artifact. It has some metrics associated with it, like how well it performed against the validation set. And then it's that model that you're deploying into production. And then you're monitoring in the way that I described, that monitoring models is different to monitoring microservices. And then your monitoring might actually cause you to go back around all sorts of different loops through this diagram. So that's kind of the flow that we're looking at here. So I'm a little short on time, so I'm going to skip over the life cycle quickly. The life cycle is really just a visual representation of how the diagram I just showed you is cyclic. And so you do data engineering, you need to keep track of the data runs when you're doing things like feature engineering. And then you train a model, which means you take a certain version of the data and you train the model, and out of the model development process come serialized models, typically Docker images with serialized models baked into them. And then those serialized models get run in production or staging and then production. And then there are these kind of two feedback loops. There's the statistical monitoring feedback loop, which is the fast one, where you can say, show me the behavior of my model in production in real time, based on like the distribution of classifications it's making. And then there's also this slower feedback loop, which is that you retrain the models with new data as you get new data coming in. And of course, the model making decisions can change the world, and so can also impact on the data that is being recorded in the database. So that's kind of the ML Ops lifecycle, and hopefully I've adequately answered the first part of the talk title now, which is what is ML Ops? My opinion is that ML Ops is not just about operating models, it's actually about the entire lifecycle of doing data engineering, training models, and then getting models into production. And it's about being able to implement this process in your company or in your organization with the same level of rigor that sort of best-in-class DevOps and software engineering teams manage. And so